Today, experience the power of Tanium's single endpoint view. The help desk will love it. Tanium is known for its ability to get quick results from thousands of endpoints in a flash. But what about when I want to drill down for details on just a single endpoint? Well, a few years ago, we released what we simply call single endpoint view. And the response was huge, especially for help desk folks who need a quick glance at everything in one place. And the best part is that you can customize this to your own needs. Well, today we welcome Tom to the show for his first time, and he's going to demonstrate how to get the most from this feature. So please introduce yourself, Tom.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. My name is Tom Dyswell. I've been with Tanium now for just over 3 years. I was lucky enough to actually celebrate that just last week. And I'm a senior enterprise engineer. So my day-to-day is actually working directly with our customers with hands-on keyboard access, helping optimize their Tanium infrastructure.
And you just returned from a big trip. Where did you go?
Yeah, I was very lucky that with my wife and some friends, we just toured around Scotland. We were told it's going to be rubbish weather, but actually it was glorious. 2.5 weeks touring Scotland with some amazing views. So it was amazing. Thank you.
And that's remarkable to have 2.5 weeks of glorious weather in Scotland. Congratulations on that. It
I
is
was
nice
told I
to.
was very lucky.
Oh, very lucky. Yeah, it's similar here in the US when we travel to Seattle. They expect it to rain all the time, but I've had pretty good luck with the weather there. And speaking of travel and weather, it's great to get out sometimes and find a different perspective. And today we're going to look at the single endpoint perspective. See how I did that right there? Yep. So, Tom, why don't you start us off? What is single endpoint view?
Single endpoint view is kind of what it says on the tin, right? It's giving you a view of a single endpoint with as much detail as you desire. And what I like about it is it's, as you mentioned earlier, a bit of a drill down. And reporting for me, sometimes when you mention people, oh, let's make a report for this and let's do some reporting. It's not a very exciting topic, is it, reporting, as much as it is getting into the techie stuff and resolving things. And reporting can give us a bit like with Interact, a wide picture. We can see detail across the estate for all endpoints, but single endpoint view helps us hone in on just one endpoint.
And depending on what modules you own, it adds new tabs sometimes in that single endpoint view. I know we just recorded the Investigate episode. You can check that out here on the channel. And it adds 3 different tabs in that view. There's lots to see there. So how do I get to that view? Why don't you just take us in and get us started?
To be honest with you, there's actually multiple ways you can get to single endpoint view, and I'll talk you through those just now. So first of all, we can see we're on the home page now for Tanium, and we have a search endpoints icon just here, just next to the ask question. And right there, you can type in quite a lot of information. So as in you could type in an IP address, a computer name, or even part of a username, for example, and it will help you find those endpoints. So I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and just put in local because there's always a few devices that end in .local. And straight away, we can see a list of machines. Obviously, if we have something a bit more specific, we would see that here. But we can also do it at the top. We have right up here in our top menu, we have another search endpoints. And this works exactly the same as what you just seen below. I'll type in a local now, and we can see the list pop up.
I like to point out there too that when you mouse over those little quick tabs at the very top, there's a keyboard shortcut if you're old school
Yes.
like me. So if the reporting one is, which is it, command colon,
Yeah, and
semicolon?
obviously being on a Mac, we've got our commands. And again, if you're on a Windows machine, it's going to be a control. So a couple other ways as well we can get to it is by asking a question. So a nice simple one here, if I just put in computer name from all machines, just to get a list of computer names. Again, you could have the most complicated question going, as long as you've got something in there as an identifier for a machine, such as computer name, computer ID, etc. You'll see this little computer icon, which does match just here. And you can click on that, and it's going to give you some very high level details. But again, we can then click on view details. Now, this is also available in reporting. So if you go into data, reporting and dashboards, and you drill down to a level again, where you do have computers being identified, again, you have this icon. And then from here, we can just click view details, and it will be the same again, using the tab at the top here. So I'll be honest, I do have one I prepared earlier, which I'll also connect to just now, which I can again do. So on the still on the single endpoint view now, I've got my menu at the top. I'm not as old school as you, Ashley. I'm not using my keyboard shortcuts, I won't lie. But again, I can just click this one here as well. And that brings us into the single endpoint view.
I love how easy it is to get right there. You know, the help desk experience. If you can coax out the IP address or computer name, which can be a challenge depending on the user sometimes, that's all you need to get started. And now you've got all this at your fingertips.
Absolutely. So one of the things I love about the single endpoint view is being able to drill down. I've got a history of working with customers on the operations side, such as patch and deploy. So if I was just to briefly go over to a dashboard now, again, here's one I prepared earlier for patch monitoring. So typically we find that, people like to report on information, and we can see from this patch monitoring, do we have any scan errors on our Windows workstations? How compliant are we? What's our compliant over so many days? But again, we're not being able to drill down and investigate. And straight away, we can see that one machine here does have 6 to 10 patches missing. Now, as we know, anything that's blue, we can click on it. So we can click here, and it's going to help us drill down a bit more. But again, with this report, we're still seeing a high level table of that information. So we want to drill down a bit more. We still have the 6 to 10 missing on this one machine. So now I'll click on the one here, and it'll drill down again into the ADI basic inventory. And it's obviously built some filters in for us, which is really useful, but still all I know about this machine is the computer name and some very basic information. Now, I noted earlier, we can obviously use this little icon here. Historically, what I would be doing at this point would be ticking this box here to drill down and interact. And I'll be building out complex questions to try and understand why maybe this is missing some patches, looking at sensors like applicable patches, patch list compliance, scan errors, deployment errors, all of these different ones that you'd actually want to ask at different times as well, because as we know, the more complicated it gets, the harder it can be sometimes to read. Now, with a single endpoint view, we can jump straight into that, and we can go and see some more information, all in that one screen, which, as you mentioned, right, the whole help desk experience is so much easier. I don't have to think about all these different sensors to get the information. It's just all here.
You know, that's a big point, Tom. Thank you for showing us that, because you're right. When we first get Tanium, it's all about interact and asking questions, finding the right sensors, and that's fun for a while until you find yourself asking those same questions multiple times over and over, because you kind of know the things you want to look at. But from what I hear you saying, I can collect all those sensors in a bucket here and get them all at once.
Absolutely. So if we just sort of cover sort of the backgrounds and let's call it the prerequisites for reporting, it's very much the same as data and reporting, and the fact that it's all about the TDS and registering sensors. So with reporting, if a sensor is registered with an Interact, you can add that into a report and build it up how you like. And this data is basically exactly the same thing, in the fact that this is all sensors that have been registered within Tanium, within Interact, and now available in a cached format. So what that means is that we can actually see offline information as well. So if we scroll down here to a machine that shows offline, we can see one here in red. I can click on that. That again opens single endpoint view in a new tab. And I can see all the same information as the machine that's online. The obvious thing here is it shows offline, and these three are grayed out. So sometimes you often find as well as when you're trying to do that investigation work and you're asking questions, you're waiting for responses to happen, and maybe that sensor isn't registered. Then you think, oh no, I need to register it, and it takes again time to get that information. But again, this is all registered and ready to go, and that the data is at your fingertips. So if I'm going to flip back to the machine we just spoke about earlier, and we can look at these different tabs and start to investigate a bit more. And what I love about this is the very first view that we see is covering so much information already. I mean, we can see the IP address, serial number, all the obvious stuff last logged in user, operating system, all the tasty stuff we want to see. But we're talking about patching, and what's one of the first things I can see as I scroll down here? Uptime, 24 days. Now, that might not have been a sensor I thought of asking originally. I might have been asking things like scan errors, deployment errors. But that uptime already tells me that this machine hasn't restarted in a while. And as we know, Windows updates does need a restart to fully install a lot of its patches. So already I've seen some information that I may not have thought of, but also could be helping me investigate and understand why we don't have that patch compliance. Now, I will just quickly flick over to one of the tabs before I go over everything in more detail. But if we look at something like endpoint management, we can see some more information about patching. And again, I can start my investigation.
And I
So
think it's interesting to point out here on these tabs, when you scroll down, there can be multiple sections within each one of these. So here we've got the patching information, but then we've also got software packages and so forth under endpoint management. And so in a minute, we're going to show you how to build your own. But notice
yes,
everything you've got at a glance here. This is the power of single endpoint view.
absolutely. So I'm going to flick over to this endpoint here. This one I picked earlier, which I felt had some useful information for us to go through. So we mentioned earlier, we have all this information just at our fingertips. And again, we've got things like the uptime, we've got hardware information, custom tags. And again, some important information here is the client version. But within this particular tab, we also have sub areas, including installed applications. I don't know about you, but this is one of my favorite sensors anyway. So I'm always going here to see what's going on. And I can just filter in here to see what's installed. And if I want to, just filter on something like Chrome. We've also got logical disks. Another good one to see what free space. We're talking about patching again. We know if it's got low on free space, it's not going to patch. Then again, we've got network adapters and of course physical disks. Now, the important thing to remember is, as I mentioned earlier, all this information is sensors that are registered in Tanium. And I've got some links I'll send over to you at the end of the call here, actually, that we can reference here, which do talk about how to register a sensor, which is really important, of course, and what that kind of data means from TDS. So TDS does poll endpoints every 13 minutes to get information, but it's also important to remember that some sensors also have a max age, and the endpoint doesn't update that information until that max age is reached. And a good example is operating system, which is typically a day. So this information may take some time to update if it's recently changed.
That's a good. I'm glad you pointed that out because we think about typically Interact, where we're asking live data type questions, but Tanium Data Service, the TDS, gives us a kind of a metadata skimmed caching layer, and that's what we're seeing here, which to your point lets us see things that are online or offline, and the last state, which makes it super helpful.
Exactly. And as you mentioned earlier, we have a lot of tabs across the top here. And this is all going to relate to a couple of things. One of them is going to be, do you have those modules in your environment? As you said earlier, you've also done one recently with Investigate. If you don't have Investigate, you won't see the relevant tabs. And also, your old favorite, RBAC. If you don't have RBAC to those areas, you're not going to see them either. And of course, I also should mention with RBAC, you're only going to be able to single endpoint view to endpoints that you have access to. So I thought it might be good to flick through some of the standard and managed tabs, if you will. So these are the ones that, as you can see labeled here, Tanium managed. These are the ones that we obviously update, manage, as excuse the pun there, if you will, and that we're going to make available in your environment. So we do have endpoint management, as we briefly touched on, and it's got what I like to call widgets, but really they're actually called pre-configured panels. And they give you some great features. So we can see here, this is a patch and deploy one, and this one covers, this section here is about patch applicability. What I also really love about this section is that not only does it have filters, but we have actions. So we could tick them all here, or just here, we've got an install button as well. So if we go to this single endpoint and we're seeing that those patches are missing and maybe we've resolved the issue or we just need to force it because maybe a maintenance window was missed, then we can click install here and that will take us straight over into patch to do a deployment. And all of the configuration we need is pretty much there, including the computer name because it's already going to be filtered, Our patch is already selected. We just need to finish it off with our limiting groups, etc. And we can patch straight from here. So let me go back to the endpoint. Again, I can go up to the top here and single endpoint view, and that will open up in our tabs. So back to endpoint management, I'll just quickly flick through this one as well. It also talks about software package applicability. Obviously, software package applicability is already done within deploy, and we already know the actions that are configured within deploy. So we can just install, remove, or as per the actions and applicability. And then
That's
finally,
beautiful, man. I mean, think about it for just a second. Okay, how many times somebody calls the help desk? Hey, I need this application, and yeah, there should be an approval process, but maybe it's something like Zoom or Teams or something that's quick and easy, and you just hit install right there as the service desk person, and wow, yeah.
yeah. And with our little, our lovely filter items box, which we have almost everywhere, which is my biggest go-to, obviously we can type in Zoom and we can see our options. And one of my favorites actually here is it does show the in use, which gives you that indication that which is the right one, which is going to be one that's in use most likely as per your company
Ooh,
policy.
nice. I never really noticed that. Boy, that's clever.
Yeah, and this one, these filters can be cool, right? Because as well, you can also just show me the latest version. This person needs the latest version, just need to know which one it is. Or the
Sweet.
in-use filter up here as well.
Oh man, you just made my day. That's cool. I didn't know that was there. Wow.
All these little nuggets that are useful to find, eh? So I could just finish off on this panel then whilst we're here. So we've got the OS patch scan, which the amount of people that I've worked with and they're saying, why are we not getting patch applicability? You've got to check your patch scan. So another really important part of this single endpoint view is when you're doing the investigation, is it being scanned? Are we getting the latest patch applicability details? And of course, maintenance windows. So I want to flick through a couple more, but I don't want to go through more in too much detail because we can then talk about making some of our own. But we do have the ones that, as you mentioned, Ashley, around investigate, where we can do a direct connect, which is really cool, which is also available up here as one of these actions. Now I'm going to talk about those actions in just a second, but I'm going to click the direct connect button here just to show you how some of this data does populate. It's going to take a few seconds though, depending on your connectivity.
Yeah,
Do
while we're waiting on that, I just want to call out we just did the investigate episode, which covers these three tabs, right? Investigate, remote management, Windows events. So go watch that episode with Josh Bryant to get a full deep dive on all these tabs, those three. Yeah.
And I must say, I'm really excited about these. And these tabs, along with a couple of the actions at the top that I will soon talk about, is what's made it for me that's so valuable, is that we can do all these different things, including, where's my favorite one? I was only just catching up with this now, the registry one, right? I mean, how game-changing is this one? But as you said, Ashley, go and check out the Investigate video for more information on that one. So let's just say we do go through these tabs and maybe we find an issue that we need to get resolved. We've got some options here. We have actions. So long as the machine is online, we can use these little sort of action buttons up here. So we can browse the file system. Another really useful one, a bit like the registry, where we can literally go in, we can find files, we can download things. And that can be useful if you're trying to find some log files, a bit like this one where it's not a Tanium log file, you've done an application install or something similar, and that log file is not in its typical directory that's accessible from a musgather, we can use this to go and get it. I love this.
So just to pause right there, there was a little download icon on the right side of that file. Just want to make sure people saw that. Yeah.
Yes.
So you got the or the delete. Got to be careful with that. You can delete a file
Yeah.
remotely as well.
Bit like the registry one, right? Registry's great that you can browse and edit it, but you've got to be so careful. So another action we also have is the screen sharing one. And these, again, are also going to be down to the modules that you've got available. You're going to need screen meet for that one, right? Now, probably the most commonly used one, deploy action. So we have a few here, including reboot and quarantine, lock and freeze, but we also have all actions. So again, if you think about that whole service desk thing, right, you do your investigation, you've asked loads of different questions, and you finally found the problem that needs fixing. If we talk about patch, that could be that Windows Update needs to be reset. So then you have to select the machine again and then do an action. Well, again, we've seen all this information here. We can use the All Actions button here. That takes us straight into our action deployment Well, we can select any package based on our RBAC. Always going to put that caveat in, and obviously do exactly that. Run that action, which will hopefully remediate things. Maybe you want to do a custom tag to label it for something, or we do have our Windows Update Reset option here.
We just looked at it. Okay, we saw disk space, we saw uptime, all these things related to the health of the endpoint. And this also points to the extensibility of Tanium, right? From the beginning, we can write our own sensors, write our own packages, and link them on that action menu. So it's all right there, customized for, I always tell folks, hey, take your top 10 tickets where you can automate the solution, create a package for that. And then now, we haven't gotten into the building your own here yet, but can we link our own Tanium packages to that action menu?
Absolutely. I mean, that action menu there, well, the all actions is going to show you every package.
Okay.
So that's where, as long as your RBAC gives you that, you can see it. Now, what we can do, which is also really cool, is when we build the single endpoint view, which I'll show you now, we can do an action panel, which I believe isn't quite GA yet, but it's coming very soon. So let me show you that. Let me show you building a dashboard now.
Oh, yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, cool. Assuming you have, again, the old caveat of our permissions to create one, we can come over here, the little plus icon, and we can literally put in any name that we want. So I'm just going to put TD new tab, just so we know that in this environment, I can come and clean this up later on. Your content set, I would typically leave that in reporting. Obviously, if you have complex RBAC, that's up to you, and a description. So we can create that, and here we have our blank tab. We can do whatever we want with this. We can add sections, panels, you name it. So we talked about patching. Let's go over a little bit of a scenario of building a patch area for investigation from here. So we could call this overview as an example, and we can right over here add pre-configured panels, add sensor details panels or text panels. So sometimes, I'll be honest, I like to start with a text panel because you know what this panel is for. You might give it a title, you might give this section a title, but not everybody else does. So maybe adding that text panel enables you to give a bit of a background to what is available here, what people should be checking for, and maybe what people should be doing about it going forwards. And being a typical text panel, you can use different formats. We have the option for headings, subheadings, bullet points, paragraphs, all that fun stuff. For demo purposes, I'm just going to put here, this is a patch monitoring panel, and put that in. Now, with any panel, you can resize them and move them about, but anything like a text or a sensor one, you can easily click the little pencil here to edit it, and you also have a duplicate option here. So the edit obviously takes us back to the same view we had just before, and the duplicate is just going to clone it to exactly the same to have two. So then what we can also do is start adding some information. So the easy ones are the pre-configured panels, and they're very much like what we've just seen, but it may be that you want some of those pre-configured panels on yours. A good one might be, because we're talking about patch, OS patch list applicability. That's a deploy one, but then maybe we also want to talk about our patch scans and our maintenance windows. So as you can see, I'm scrolling down, I'm ticking the ones that I want. And of course, there's other ones in here for other modules, but we're talking about patch for this time. We click add panels, and just like that, there they are. Now these can be resized, as I mentioned, but notice this, they can only be deleted. We can't clone it and we can't edit it because these are pre-configured panels. So all we can really do is resize these. What if we want to make our own? We can use a sensor panel detail, sensor details panel, sorry. And then we have every sensor that's been registered at our fingertips. Again, the old RBAC caveat does exist, of course. So maybe we want to add some information, a bit like, so we can look at patch installation history. By just typing in patch, we can do our typical filter. We can see the category for patches here and what they all look like. Very much similar to reporting, right? You can pick and choose which part you want in this as it is.
So what
As
we're
I
looking
scroll,
at there are sensors that have been registered in the TDS under the Interact
yep,
settings gear, and then here's the sensor name with each of the columns of data in that sensor. So we don't have to add all of it. We can just cherry pick particular pieces of that sensor data. That's nice.
Absolutely. So for example, what I could do here, I want my patch installation history. I click that little blue icon there, and it does require you to do a parameter for this particular sensor in question, but not all sensors will have parameters, of course. They will just go straight in. But if I apply that, you can see it's in a vertical card layout right now. I could change that to a horizontal table. But then I might think to myself, I want to add some more information to it. And I just want to add something simple. Maybe I want to add something else related, like computer name. You might not want to, but we'll do this for easy demonstration purposes. But being single endpoint view, computer name was already covered, of course. But yeah, we can add that, and lo and behold, our table starts to grow. But as I mentioned, as this was already covered, we don't need to see it that many times. We can actually come over here and delete it. Give this a nice little title and click done. And here we have our own panel that we just made.
It's interesting. We think about Interact for querying endpoints, but this is actually kind of based on the reporting dashboardage. And so a lot of the same things we've done with dashboards and reports already just come right over here to a single endpoint view.
Absolutely. And what I like about this is that within reporting, it can get complex if you're trying to have lots of data about one or more endpoints as you try and add more and more sensors. But if you think about it, you can just do one sensor here, right? Scroll back up, add another sensor panel, and maybe this time we're just going to go for applicable patches in a different, which is obviously a different format. And we're just going to pick, I don't know, title and install status, get the KBs in because that's always useful, and then classification. Some of my favorites when it was talking about applicable patches. Again, we'll go for a horizontal table. We'll call this applicable patches. Done. Scroll right down. Now, oh, this is a mess, is what you're thinking already. Well, we can easily just resize these, put them next to each other. I dragged that one across there to help with that. So now I can see two different types of information in one view without having a messy, complicated report where I'm trying to have all that information in one place.
What makes me so excited about this is you can make it show anything you want at a glance for
Yes.
any endpoint. And we're talking about patching right now, but I mean, think about all of Tanium. Any
Yeah.
particular, whether it's comply or let's say, we've already looked at asset data, performance data we've seen in there from those modules, but also think about, security use cases, right? What are the open ports that are talking on that endpoint right now? What open connections does it have, right? What's processes are running in memory right now? All these types of things you can add there for any ops or security risk use case, and every team can really benefit.
Yeah, and then not just that, you can also resolve, remediate. So as I mentioned, this is still a bit early access, but we can come over here and add an action panel. Now this is super exciting because for me, this takes it from investigating and then going off to remediate later to full on remediation. Because we can do add an action panel and we can start building this out how we like. So we could label this as a remediation. We can give it a topic, we'll just call it general, and give it a priority. We'll say hi. Then we could put a message. So we could say here, these are the 2 recommended actions to remediate. And we're talking about patch, so I'll keep it on topic. Remediate patch issues. Make that a lovely big header. And then we'll add some actions to that. Now, watch this. We'll add an action. We're going to add 2. We're going to call this one Reset Windows Update. A typical issue we see when we're working with patch is that Windows Update has crashed, right? So we need to reset that. So we'll add the package for Reset Windows Update. Another common one is that maybe the patch tooling itself is faulty, it hasn't upgraded properly, maybe it's got an error. Sometimes you might need to think about reinstalling that tool. Again, we have obviously a package for that, and we can select Reinstall Tool. Now, I am going to put a caveat there, that's for Windows only. And obviously, if you're going to be doing Linux, etc., do add those packages in too. And again, as we were just talking about a minute ago, Ashley, you can put your own actions in here. So if you've made your own remediation action, you can link it to this action panel. We can click Done. Now, obviously, this might be better at the top. If I just move that across here, drag this to the top so it's really top of mind and hit save. We can now go to deploy action, and there are those two actions. So we don't need someone to go up here to deploy action, all actions, and ensure that they know the right one. We are already telling them which actions they need to run to remediate whatever might be in this particular dashboard or this particular panel.
Wow, Tom. I mean, this is, I often use the box of Legos example here. If you like, I guess it's Lego is the plural of Lego, right? It's not Legos, it's Lego. I've heard from enthusiasts. I want to get that right. But here's a box of Lego that you can make literally anything you want here. And wow, I again, I find myself in this place on the show often. It's just like, this is so much fun. If only I had this 20 years ago. Wow.
It is easy to get carried away. And let me show you, I've got two ones here that I've made earlier. Bit of Blue Peter for you if you're in the UK. Here's one I made earlier. So I've got a one that I use for patching a lot. I've got a core and patch overview. So here's one I made. I'll quickly talk you through it. Where actually we start off with looking at the operating system. Is it going to be one that's supported? Has it been online recently? Is action lock on or off? Because as we know, if action lock is on, patching and deploy isn't going to be doing any actions on it. That's obviously you've got an override for that one. I also included here all the ECF tools, all our endpoint configuration tools. If patch is broken on that endpoint, it's not going to patch. Same for deploy. I want to come in here and check that that's okay. Now I can. And then a bit like the one we're just making, I've made some sections around the history. I want to know, has Tanium been installing patches recently? Maybe use custom tags for your computer groups for the deployments and for maintenance windows. We've got that covered. We've got maintenance windows because a lot of my customers have needed to have a maintenance window to patch servers, etc. We need to know, does this one have a valid maintenance window? Then I'm seeing all the deploy information. Where's there any deploy errors? Where's the this is patch deploy here, patch deploy errors, patch deploy statuses. So ongoing deployments right now, what's their status? And finally, the results or the history of the previous results. Finalize with the compliance. Are we compliant? And if we're not, what patches are we missing? So you can see here that by taking information that is useful to troubleshooting I've already done with all the different sensors, I've built a panel for me to do my investigation. That with my customer support, we have been through it, and we find that their help desk is, got that visibility all in one place.
So I'm imagining, most help desk, service desk, there's a few power users who really have a mastery of all the tools at their disposal. And we've heard this a lot of times from help desk folks like, hey, I've got like 10 different tools that I have to jump into to try to fix or find a problem with an endpoint. Now you can just pull all of this view into one place. It just makes your troubleshooting faster and your
Yeah.
remediation faster with those linked actions. Wow, I'm curious. You work with customers on a regular basis. What are some other examples of things that they've done with this?
So I've got one other example prepared for you here, actually, and that is around Defender for Endpoint. So we work really well with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and we can obviously do dashboards and reporting. We can easily help with the onboarding and even some of the management. But often what we found was you might get some machines that have performance issues or maybe some other issues around Defender. And again, you've got that whole, what question do I ask? Which sense do I need to investigate it? Well, we built this so we can go and do exactly that. We can see all of the answers all in one place for that endpoint. For them, they would see their org ID here to confirm it's definitely been onboarded. They could see that Defender was definitely installed and whether it was healthy or not. Then we can see all the components of Defender: antivirus, anti-malware, spyware, network inspection. Are they actually up to date? Are they on the right versions? Anything we need to remediate there. Then, of course, exclusions. Now, how often do we come across when machines are missing AV exclusions and then we have performance problems? So we can come in here and check that as well. Finished up with, they wanted to know, how this machine then done a recent scan? And then what we can do then is take action again, right? We can use our actions to remediate these things. So these are the two that we literally use all the time outside of the managed ones. that are already available to us from Tanium to do our investigation on our endpoints.
This is a fantastic tour today, Tom, for single endpoint view. Thank you. Anything else you want to give our viewers? I know we're running out of time here. Anything for final comments?
I think the final thing I would say is when you do any kind of reporting, single endpoint view, dashboards, do try and keep it simple before you go into too much detail. And just think that dashboarding can be really high level, reporting a bit more detailed, and then you can have the real deep dive stuff in single endpoint view. But if you overcomplicate it, it can make it hard for everyone else to use.
Well, this is a fantastic tour. And I've wanted to do a show on this for so long. Thank you for raising your hand and saying, hey, let's do a show on single endpoint view. Because you're right, there's so many use cases that makes it so much easier and just everyday support. And we're talking about the help desk here, but anybody that's a Tanium user can build their own here again with RBAC. And that's a good point. You can create these for other people on your team to use. And that's just another example of the extensibility of Tanium. So thanks, Tom, for giving us this tour. And as always, in the show notes below, we have a ton of resources linked for you to documentation and to community conversations out there in the Titans community. When you go to help.tanium.com, there are discussions out there. People are saying, hey, how do I do this with single endpoint viewer? Here's an example of what I've done. Go ahead and rack up those Titan badge points out there in community. Share examples of what you've done so that others can take inspiration from that and you can learn from others. So that wraps up today's episode of Tanium Tech Talks. Until next time, go Tanium.